Hey guys, so what we're going to do today is we are looking at using the particle system Niagara in Unreal to create motion capture without bodies, and this is what we're going to be making. So this is an avatar moving in space having these sort of ribbons streaming out of them randomly, and we can prove that this is a person by turning our skeletal mesh back on. And then we can see that it is our avatar Pearl from Mixamo moving in space and having these ribbons emitted from her body, particularly from her mesh. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that today. So I am using version 420. Niagara works in 420 or later. If you're using OptiTrack, I recommend you stay with 420 because the plugin, as of this recording, does not work for any more recent versions of Unreal. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the Niagara plugins are enabled. So I already went ahead and did this. If you have not done this yet, it will prompt you to restart the project. So make sure you do that or it won't work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I have a character folder already set up, and I'm going to go ahead and bring in Pearl. So I already rigged Pearl with some motion capture. So if you have some motion capture files, you can use that. Make sure import animations is turned on. And like always, if you don't have motion capture data, you can always use something from Mixamo or the CMU database. And we have some warnings, but we don't care about that. All right, so Pearl is brought in, and I created a folder for all of our special effects. So the first thing we want to do is make an emitter. So this is where our particles are coming from. So with Niagara, the two most important components are the emitter, which is where particles are emitted from, and a system, and this contains one or more emitters. So we're going to have an emitter, and then we're also going ahead and make a system. Great, and today we're also going to be using a module script. Okay, and now that we have all of that together, we're going to go ahead and make some ribbons. So if you're getting used to the Unreal mouse system, you might find this window a little counterintuitive. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn the orbit mode off. All right, and usually when we think of particles, this is what we think of as sort of fireworky, lots of dots emerging on the space, but I don't want this aesthetic today. I'm looking for ribbons, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the sprite renderer, which is what's making all of these dots, and I'm going to add instead a ribbon renderer. And for material, I am looking for just our default ribbon material. And if you don't see this pop up under view options, make sure that show engine content and show plugin content is checked off. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. And a couple of things up here. So under emitter lifecycle, we want to make sure the max loop count is 0. That means it's going to loop infinitely. And I'm going to change our next loop duration. Now these numbers don't have to be exact. Feel free to play around with them. I'm also going to turn the spawn rate down. Now most of this stuff I don't care about. So I don't care about this or this, and I'm going to get rid of these guys. I do want to set the lifetime, so to give this an exact number, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set a local value. And again, if you're familiar with creative coding, particles have a lifetime, so after a certain amount of time, the particle dies or is removed from the screen. And we have particle spawn and particle update, and I want to just point out that if you're familiar with creative coding, processing, Arduino, Cinder, things like that, it's very similar where this is the setup loop, the setup function, and this is the draw loop. So spawn is what happens to the particle the instant it is created, and particle update is what happens every frame that the particle is alive or during its lifetime. And I'm going to go ahead and delete. Nope. Didn't mean to do that. Whoops. I'm going to delete acceleration force Don't delete update age. And I'm also going to add a couple of properties. So I'm going to add, there we go. I'm going to add a ribbon width, and we're going to set this to 10. I also want to add particle color because I want to be able to change the color if I feel like it. That's a fun color. All right, and then one more thing that I'm going to add is I want to set a specific parameter, and we're going to set the particle ribbon link order, and we're just going to tie this to particle normalized age. All right, so this is looking pretty good. So we're going to go back into our module script. You'll notice you have an error right here. If you hit compile, that error will go away. Another thing is you want to give this a category. It doesn't really matter what you call it as long as you remember it. We will need this name in about a minute. So because I want these ribbons to emit from the skeletal mesh, I need a way to set what the skeletal mesh is. So we want to add a skeletal mesh variable. And what's nice about the module script is it gives us a little more functionality, a little more flexibility than just this standard emitter template. So we're going to go ahead and make a new skeletal mesh, and this is going to be a placeholder for where we set the skeletal mesh. And I'm going to learn how to spell. So we're going to get the position, and we're going to set this to the particle position. And because a skeletal mesh has lots of different coordinates, we're just going to grab a random one. And this is what's creating that sort of jittery, chaotic effect that we saw earlier. So I'm getting a random coordinate from our skeletal mesh and using that to set where our ribbon is being emitted from. I'm also going to need a ribbon ID. And then Niagara has this really nice function that just sort of takes care of all of the ID functionality in the background, and we don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to compile, apply, save, and that's all you need to do. So if we go back to our emitter, we want to add the module script into the emitter. So I'm going to go into particle spawn. And remember I said you need to remember that category we gave the module script. I called mine ribbon, so find whatever you called it. And then we're going to select our module script. We have the skeletal mesh because we added it as a variable. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a user variable. And what this will allow me to do, as you'll see later, is I can set which skeletal mesh I want to use in blueprints or even in the details panel. And this is important because if I have multiple emitters, they can have different skeletal meshes, and they don't all have to be the same skeletal mesh. It just allows for more flexibility. And I'm going to go ahead and tie that to my skeletal mesh. All right, great. And I'm also going to create a couple more user variables while we're here. So I'll make one for color. And I'm going to go ahead and bring that into color right here. I'm going to make one for, let's see, I want to make it for lifetime. We don't have a lifetime variable, but I can just use float. I'm going to call this lifetime, bring that to float. And then I'm going to set the ribbon width, which again is just a float. And I'll go ahead and drag that over. All right, so I'm going to compile, apply, save. We always want to do that early and often. And this is looking pretty good. Now, remember, I said that our system contains one or more emitters, so we have to go into our system and add the emitter. This also might be a good time to save our project. So I'm going to go into my system, and the way I add an emitter is down here with the track button. And you might notice we haven't seen anything in the preview panel in system or emitter, and that's fine. We're going to see it when we put it all together. And I'm just gonna set a default skeletal mesh. If you get this error, just fix now. And just remember that Niagara is still considered beta in 420, so there are gonna be a couple blips and hiccups, so don't worry about that. And we'll just set some default colors here. We want to make sure the lifetime is greater than 0, or it's going to die instantly. We want to make sure the width is greater than 0, or we're not going to see the ribbon. All right, this looks good. So compile and save. And now we're going to make a blueprint and put this all together. So we're going to go ahead and make an actor blueprint. And I'm just going to add in 2 components. I'm going to add in my skeletal mesh, which is going to be Pearl. There she is, looking a little funky. And I'm also going to add my Niagara component. And we want to make sure we assign this to the system that we just built. And now we have these ribbons emerging from her in random places. Compile, save. And the last thing I really want to do is just make sure that we have an animation going, because while this is pretty cool, it's much cooler if she's moving. So I'm just going to say, take the skeletal mesh and make sure we're playing the animation that I want. And I want this to happen at the first moment I start the program. So I'm going to use event begin play. And that's it. If we bring her into the space and we hit play, there she goes. So the ribbons are picking random places on the skeletal mesh to emit. Now, if I want just these ribbons and I don't want to see Pearl, I'm going to select my blueprint in my world outliner. If I open up the secret window here, I can select my skeletal mesh, and I'm just going to search for the property visible and turn it off. And then for fun, I'm going to go ahead and change the color of my ribbon, and we'll make it, I don't know, let's do this pink. That's fun. And for dramatic effect, I'm going to get rid of some of this lighting. So you can go, and this can go, that can go, yep, that can go, and that can go. Great. And so now I have this very dramatic data viz of motion. So this is how you can do motion capture with Autobody, some pretty cool data viz, and we wrote 0 lines of code. Not bad. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There will be more, and thanks for watching.